Imagine a man-made sea appearing in the middle of the world's harshest desert. Egypt is moving ahead with the Sahara Canal, a project so big it makes the pyramids look like toys. They promise endless electricity and new cities for millions of families. But here is the deal. This project was stopped before for a reason that will keep you up at night. Engineers have finally exposed why flooding this giant hole in the ground might be the biggest mistake in human history.
This is what it will look like. That is larger than the Nile River Delta.
The truth involves nuclear secrets and a hidden danger that is already ticking away. Squeezing millions. Egypt has a massive problem that is getting worse every single second. To really get what is happening, you have to look at a map of the country. What you see is a huge space, but that is a bit of a lie. Almost everyone in the nation, all 110 million people, lives in a tiny, narrow strip of land. This tiny green ribbon is the Nile Delta, and it makes up less than 5% of the entire country. The other 95% is just desert. It is empty, scorching, and basically useless for living. This creates a huge crunch because the population is booming. Right now, there are 11 births every single minute. That is a lot of new mouths to feed and a lot of people who need a place to sleep. Everyone is crowded along the river and they are running out of room fast. They need more electricity, they need more fresh water, and they desperately need more land for people to work. For decades, the nation ran on the power of the famous Aswan High Dam. It was a massive project that changed the country forever. But here is the catch. The Nile is tapped out. You just cannot get any more energy from it. To power its growing cities, the country turned to natural gas. It became incredibly dependent on burning fossil fuels. But gas is expensive, and it pollutes. Even worse, their own gas fields are starting to run dry. The country is heading for a massive energy crisis. They need a new, giant source of power, and they need it fast. That is where the Sahara Depression comes in. Out in the western desert lies a truly gigantic place. We are talking about an area of roughly 7,000 square miles. To put that in perspective, it is almost the exact size of the entire state of New Jersey. It is a vast, empty, and incredibly harsh place filled with sand dunes and salt marshes. And get this, the lowest point of the hole is 440 feet below sea level. That is like a 40-story skyscraper digging down into the earth. For centuries, people saw this as a wasteland. But for modern engineers, a giant hole right next to a giant sea is an amazing opportunity. The plan is simple on paper. The hole is 440 feet deep, and the Mediterranean Sea is at sea level. All they have to do is dig a channel. The plan is to cut a path through the desert anywhere from 34 to 60 miles long. This channel would connect the sea to the edge of the hole. Once that channel is open, the seawater would just flow in all by itself. No pumps are needed because gravity would do all the work. Water would pour into this giant basin, creating a massive new lake right in the middle of the Sahara. But here is the crazy part. The goal is not to fill it all the way up. Because this place is so hot, the water would evaporate at a mind-blowing rate. The sun would be boiling the water away every single day. Engineers did the math and figured out that if they let the water flow in at just the right speed, they could match the evaporation. The lake would stay at about 200 feet below sea level forever. This means you would have a permanent river pouring down a 200-foot drop. And what do you build on a permanent waterfall? A massive power plant. This single project could generate thousands of megawatts of clean electricity. It sounds like a perfect solution to every problem the country has. In April of 2023, the government even signed a brand new contract to start a fresh study on how to make it happen. It seems too good to be true, and that is because there is a buried secret waiting to be found. Something about this perfect plan was so scary that it had to be hidden for over a century. Fallout risks. The idea of flooding the desert is not new at all. The very first serious proposal came all the way back in 1912. But the idea really got serious in 1957 when the CIA got involved. That is right, the secret agents presented a top-secret document to the President of the United States. They argued that flooding the Depression would be a symbol of peace and progress. It would change the local weather and bring more rain. It would create thousands of jobs and new places for people to live. This got the ball rolling, and a German engineer named Friedrich Bassler became the project's biggest fan for decades. But they all ran into the same massive 600-foot-tall problem called the Alifa Plateau. This is a high rocky ridge that stands between the hole and the sea. It is a wall of solid rock over 660 feet high. To dig a canal through that, we are talking about moving billions of tons of rock. The cost was just insane and mind-boggling. Every single study came back with the same answer. It was not worth it. The project would be more expensive than anything ever built in human history. It just could not be done with normal digging. So they started looking for wild ways to dig. The crazy part is they decided to use nuclear bombs. You have to remember, this was the 1950s and 60s. People had this wild idea that nuclear power could be used for construction. They called it peaceful nuclear excavation. The plan they came up with was totally terrifying. They would drill 213 deep holes along the path of the new canal. Then they would lower a 1.5 megaton nuclear device into every single hole. And then they would set them all off at once. Let us be very clear about those numbers. A 1.5 megaton device is 100 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, and they were going to use 213 of them. The total power would have been 319.5 megatons. Here is a wow factor for you. The Tsar Bomba, the most powerful nuclear weapon ever set off in history, was 50 megatons. This canal project planned to use the power of more than 6 Tsar Bombas just to dig a ditch. What could possibly go wrong? Well, basically everything. This was the first time the government realized what it was about to do. The first problem was the radioactivity. The project's supporters just brushed this off. When people asked if the new sea would be radioactive, the joke was that they would just toss some pills in the water. Nobody was laughing. The entire canal and the new sea would be a toxic, glowing soup for centuries. The second problem was the people. They would have to move at least 25,000 people out of the way. But the third problem was the one that truly scared everyone. The blast site was only about 280 miles away from a massive fault line in the earth. The shock waves from that many explosions would be bigger than any earthquake ever recorded. There was a very high risk that these peaceful explosions would trigger unstoppable earthquakes. They could have leveled cities and caused a regional disaster. Faced with the choice of a radioactive canal or an apocalypse, the government rejected the plan. The price for saving money was way too high. The nuclear shovel was just too monstrous to even think about. The nuclear plan was a total bust, but the modern way to dig has its own deadly clock ticking. Underground machines. For decades, the project sat on a shelf collecting dust because the rock wall was too big. But then technology caught up. Today, we do not need atomic shovels. We have the worm. They are officially called tunnel boring machines. These things are some of the most impressive pieces of engineering on the entire planet. A machine like this is not just a drill. It is an entire underground factory. Up front, there is a massive rotating cutting head. It is a giant metal disc as big as a building covered in smaller cutters. This head presses against the rock and chews its way through the earth. As it grinds up the rock, a long belt moves all the rubble out. At the same time, the machine builds the tunnel walls as it goes. These machines are huge. A single one can be as long as 14 buses and weigh as much as 143 of them. Egypt already has experience using them. They use giant ones to dig the massive tunnels under the Suez Canal. Those machines were 41 feet wide, which is the height of a 4-story building. They also use them for the metro system in the city. So, here is the deal. The modern plan does not need a massive open canal. It just needs a few of these giant machines to drill long tunnels. They would drill for 60 miles right under the rock wall. Seawater would flow through these massive underground pipes. It is still very expensive, costing many billions of dollars, but it is no longer science fiction. But here is the other catch. There is a problem from the past that has not gone away. What most people do not realize is where the depression is located. It is right next to a place called El Alamein. If that name sounds familiar, it is because it was the site of one of the biggest and most terrible battles of World War II. For months, armies fought back and forth across this exact stretch of desert. And what did they leave behind? Landmines and shells that never went off. We are not talking about a few thousand. We are talking about millions. This is the second realization. The planned route for the new tunnels runs directly through one of the most contaminated areas on the planet. Some estimates say there are 17 million unexploded items buried in the sands. 17 million. It is a forgotten garden of destruction just waiting. This is a ticking time bomb. You cannot just send a crew out there and start digging. The first scoop of a bulldozer could set off a chain reaction. Before a billion-dollar machine can even be built, the entire 60-mile path would have to be cleared. Demining is not like in the movies. It is slow, terrifying, and incredibly dangerous. It takes teams of people walking in careful patterns with metal detectors. It involves special armored tanks that beat the ground with chains. It costs a fortune and takes years. This hidden cost is why the project has stalled over and over. The cost is not just in the digging, it is in making the land safe enough to even walk on. Even with the danger of millions of mines, the promise of a green paradise is too big to ignore. Let us just say they do it. They find the money and clear 17 million landmines. They drill the 60-mile-long tunnels and open the gates. Mediterranean water begins to pour into the desert. What is the grand payoff for all this risk? The first and biggest payoff is energy. As the water flows, it would fall over 197 feet into the hole. This permanent man-made waterfall would drive the turbines of a massive power plant. The initial plan was designed to produce 670 megawatts, but the real genius is something called pumped storage. Basically, the project would create a giant battery for the whole country. At night, when people are sleeping and there is extra power, the station would reverse its turbines. It would use that extra power to pump water back up into a smaller reservoir on the high ground. Then, during the day, when everyone turns on their air conditioning at the same time, they would release that water. It would fall back down and generate a massive surge of electricity right when it is needed most. With this system, the total power could be as high as 5,800 megawatts. Here is your wow factor. Is Egypt building a green future or a continental disaster that cannot be stopped? If we poison the world's largest aquifer, there is no going back. What do you think? Like and subscribe.